Today in Draw My Life, the lost episode of Thomas and Friends. There is a missing episode hidden in a Thomas and Friends DVD box. And yes, we are talking about that children's cartoon about a train called Thomas and the rest of his train friends. The episode hasn't been seen by many, but those who have seen it have said that things around them became a bit strange after seeing the episode. Today, we discuss the cases of Kenny and Mike, two boys who had the DVD in their possession and who witnessed the episode and its consequences. Kenny was babysitting the sister of one of his friends one night. To entertain them a bit, he proposed to see a movie and they accepted the idea. Kenny went to the box of DVDs and started looking. Something caught his eye, a box from a show he used to watch as a child. When he took it out of the box, the girls got worried and warned him that they would not see that movie because he would come for them. Kenny didn't understand what they meant, but was curious to find out. So he decided to sneak the DVD in his backpack and take it home with him. When he arrived, he went to his room and turned on his computer. He took the box out of his backpack and placed the DVD inside. The episode suddenly started playing, and Kenny realized that nothing was right. The show's intro showed some weird glitches. There were no credits, music was playing in reverse, and the screen was interrupted by random seconds of static. Kenny didn't pay much attention to it, thinking the DVD was too old. When the episode finally started, everything seemed to have returned to normal, until the characters appeared. On the screen, you could see the trains at Knapford Station, but they all had very sad faces. Also, the fat controller was now very skinny, and Thomas was nowhere to be seen. The inspector then approached James and asked if he was ready. The train responded crying that it didn't want to do it, but the inspector insisted. James went inside the tunnel, entered, and the whole screen went dark. Kenny was weirded out because that had not been a normal episode, and honestly, it had been quite murky. As soon as the DVD returned to the main menu, Kenny decided to remove the disc and return it to its box. The computer pulled out the DVD, and Kenny got the first surprise of the night. On the disc, there was a written message that hadn't been there before. The message read, "You have stolen my life." Kenny didn't understand anything. That message was not there when he introduced the disc for the first time. What had happened? That night, Kenny dreamed that he was a train traveling the show's tracks. Then, he realized that he was approaching the tunnel which James had entered. As he entered, he heard a loud scream and woke up. Kenny was completely wet of sweat and terrified. The next morning, he remembered that he had forgotten to do his homework, so he took the book out of his backpack to complete it. Then the second surprise appeared. Every page in his book had been ripped out, except one that had the letter T scribbled on it. Kenny put the DVD back into the computer to see if there was anything in the episode that he hadn't seen. As James entered the tunnel, he heard a series of voices. It was Thomas and James talking. Thomas recounted disturbing events such as animal abuse and suicide. James asked Thomas to stop, to which the train only replied, "You have stolen my life. Now I'll steal yours." James screamed loudly again, and then all was silent. Kenny went to remove the disc. But every time Kenny wanted to remove it, the computer would show an error. Suddenly, his phone started ringing. Kenny thought it was his mother and took the call. But a sinister voice on the other end said, "I know you're listening, Kenny." The voice was Thomas. Finally, the disc came out of the computer and Kenny did the logical thing. He put it back in the box and carried it to the dumpster outside of his house. Once the DVD disappeared from his life, everything returned to normal. Mike's story began one day towards the end of his workday. He worked as a garbage collector, and that morning he had to go through Kenny's neighborhood. He and his partner entertained themselves by searching through the garbage for things that could be upcycled. This is how he found the Thomas and Friends DVD. It was at the bottom of one of the containers, and this caught Mike's attention, as he had been looking for a gift for his nephew, whose favorite show was the trains. The box seemed fairly new to him, and he wondered who would have thrown away a DVD in those conditions. But to make sure it wasn't a faulty DVD, he decided to take it home and try it out first. If the DVD had no faults, he would give it to his nephew. Mike came home that night and took the DVD up to his room. There, he turned on the computer and put the disc in to play it. The program started immediately, but something wasn't right. The introduction of the new show was quite slow, with no background music. Also, instead of Thomas appearing with the other trains as usually, he didn't appear at all on the screen. In its place, a train with a sad and scared face could be seen going down the tracks. Mike was sure that this wasn't normal and that something was wrong. This was definitely not a common episode. The train then headed to what looked like the ruins of an abandoned station. There were just a few more trains, all with the same expression, a mixture of sadness and fear. Some even had marks and scars on their faces. The train approached the fat controller, who had completely changed his appearance. He was so thin that he looked ill. His eyes seemed to be bloodshot, and his dark circles were clearly noticeable. He looked like a person who hadn't slept in days and could collapse at any moment. Mike was surprised by the appearance of this character. The inspector simply went to where the train was, looked him in the face, and with a sinister voice said, "It's time to go." The train started moving forward and headed for the tunnel. Around the entrance, parts of metal and other trains could be seen scattered around and broken. Without saying anything, the train entered the tunnel, and a second later, the screen went completely black. Mike tried to fast forward the episode to see if that was the end, but the buttons weren't working. He decided to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, but as soon as he was about to leave the room, he heard a voice say, "Don't leave me alone, Mike." Mike went to the computer and suddenly heard another voice, Thomas's voice, saying, "Mike, do you want to see something fun?" Then the voice of another train began to scream in pain, followed by noises of metal being destroyed and skin being torn off. Mike removed the DVD from the computer, put it in its case, and set it aside. That night, Mike had a hard time falling asleep, and in the middle of the night, he got up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. A voice stopped him as he passed the television in the living room. "Mike, here I am. You've missed my trick." The image on the television was of the tunnel entrance from the episode. Mike tried turning off the TV, but nothing worked. Then he began to hear manic laughter in the distance, followed by the sound of a train moving down the tracks. As time passed, the laughter and noise of the train became louder, as if it were approaching. Then he saw it. Thomas was at the end of the tunnel and was heading straight for Mike, laughing like crazy. Mike unplugged the television to turn off the episode. He tried to go back to sleep, but fear had kept him from closing his eyes. In the morning, he went to work exhausted and threw the DVD case in the trash. During break time, Mike took out his cell phone to check emails and messages. One in particular caught his attention. The subject only said, "Last night we had a lot of fun. Look at the photos." Attached to the mail were a few pictures of Mike watching the episode on the television in the living room. Someone had been watching him. Did the Kenny and Mike stories scare you? If you want more episodes like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next video.